All right, so with that, let's go ahead and invite our candidates up here to take their seats. Here we'll have Victor Minjares, David Daggett, Irene Bowling, and Jedediah Haney. Okay, to start things off, we're just going to ask each candidate in turn to please introduce yourself and just say why you're running for office. And we're going to give you 4 minutes each to make that initial statement, and then we'll follow up with some additional questions, okay? And why don't we go ahead and start with Victor.
Hi, I'm Victor Minjares. I'm running for Thurston County Prosecutor because our system's been out of control for years. The general fund budget, which is controlled directly by the Board of Commissioners, County Commissioners, has been growing. The share that's been taken up by the Law and Justice section of the budget has been growing and growing almost every year, and now it's budgeted at 76% of the entire general fund budget. All the discretionary budget is going to courts, police, jails, the prosecutor's office, public defense counsel, and miscellaneous agencies associated with law and justice. Most of that is through expansion of the jail, I believe. It's expensive to run a jail, and it's very expensive to keep people in jail. Did you know it costs about $43,000 a year to fill just one bed in the jail? That's equivalent to about 3 times what the county pays a school teacher, their share of the salary. The state pays the rest, county share. You could pay 3 of those, 3 teachers for that. It's $117 a day and 38 cents, and yet somehow our system is plagued by continuances, where we have cases after case put over again and again and again, person going back into custody. Now, most of the people in custody, you think that they're serving a jail sentence, but that's actually not the case. Most of the people who are in jail right now, every day in Thurston County, have not been convicted of a single crime. They're there because they are poor. They can't afford bail. We need to look at changing the presumption when someone's arrested for a crime from what's the lowest bail you can make to you're going to get out of custody and come back for your appearance, and if you don't come back, we'll deal with you then. That should be the presumption. There are other alternatives to throwing someone in jail. There's electronic monitoring. And if people don't come back for their court appearance, there are enhancements that can be added because of that. But we shouldn't start out from the presumption that someone who lives and works in the community and is arrested on their second DUI is going to be in jail for more than a day or 2 before they get in front of a judge. Okay? People lose jobs if they're in jail for more than 3 days. People who lose jobs tend to lose their place of residence. You're in jail for a month, you're not going to have a job when you come out. Your family probably is going to have trouble making the rent too. Your kids are going to know you're gone and there's not going to be any food or money in the house. So the kids are going to be acting out at school. The problems from over-incarceration and pretrial incarceration particularly magnify throughout the social system. We can't look at what's just good for the courts. Oh good, the person is in custody and they showed up for the next court appearance because we brought them from the jail at $117 a day a month later. No, we can't run our system like that anymore. We have to look beyond the stovepipe of the criminal justice system to the ripple effects in society. The other thing I want to point out is we had a new jail built that was budgeted at $24 million. I believe it came in at $48 million by the time it was all done, and then it sat empty for some reason for several years before we moved people from the old inadequate jail to the newer jail. Now they're using special funds designated for public housing, low-income public housing, for parks, for other things, to build yet another addition to the jail of 110 beds. We're running at about 105% capacity in our jails every year. Okay, what that means is we actually pay other jurisdictions to house our people. We've got to stop that. Thurston County desperately needs reform, and I want to bring it here. Thank you.
And I'm Dave Daggett. I'm running for the House, the 35th Legislative District. My wife and I live on Hartstein Island, and we have a son, 25 years old. He's an electrician. And I really got involved in politics after the presidential election. I volunteered to be the webmaster for Mason County Democrats and also 35th Legislative District. I'm on the executive board of Mason County Dems. And I just felt like I needed to do something more, because when I saw what was happening in Washington, D.C., the erosion of our safety net, the attacks on our safety net. I just read before we came here, there's a $302 billion proposed cut to our safety net, which will include Medicare and Medicaid. I'm also upset because of the tax cut that we saw, where 83% of the benefits from that tax cut goes to the wealthy 1%. In Washington, that means somebody making more than $670,000 a year. They'll reap the benefits of that tax cut. And the third reason is I worked at Boeing for quite a few years. I'm an engineer. I'm not a career politician, but maybe that's a good thing. Maybe it'll be good to get somebody into office that knows about science. There's several familiar faces here from the March for Science. I was part of the organizing team there. So I want to see if we can do something with jobs and science. Like one of my projects I worked on there was biofuel, and we had a project where we were taking wood chips or wood waste from a mill and then converting it over into biofuel, and we flew an airplane from Seattle to Washington, D.C. So in Shelton, for instance, it's an economically depressed town because the mill has left town. There's a lot of unemployed mill workers there. And wouldn't it be great if we could have some sort of synergistic process with the mill to where we could take some of those waste products and turn it into a biofuel, or it's actually biobutanol, which is a little higher value than biofuel. So those are my three platforms that I'm running on, and I would be very honored to represent all of you in the 35th District. Thank you.
I see several familiar faces here, and I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me. My name's Irene Bowling. I'm running for state senator in the 35th LD. I'm running against Tim Sheldon and 3 other Republicans. I'm also the only woman in the race and the only true Democrat in the race. I got involved in politics. I've always voted Democratic, and my dad's a Navy vet, and I grew up in Bremerton, Washington. Come from a working class family. My parents worked at the shipyard. I'm a professional musician, concert pianist, and I've run a music school. I also taught at the University of Maryland in the piano department there, and also at Olympic College for 8 years. So I've been involved in teaching music for my whole life. But in addition to that, when Al Gore lost his election in 2000, I became very aware that what's wrong with this picture? We are on a slippery slope here. Now, of course, this was 18 years ago, but things have just gotten worse and worse and worse. I started out just volunteering at the local Kitsap County Democrats office, then I became a PCO, then I became state committee woman for the 35th, then I became chair of the 35th, then I decided to run against Tim Sheldon. So that's kind of a dramatic leap there. But I lost by 3,000 votes. I only lost by 500 votes in Thurston. So the reason I bring this up is that to make this happen, I really want to concentrate my efforts on Thurston. I think we can turn this around. I think this is within reach. We only have one state senator above the Republican situation here. And why did everything end on session? Why did we get so many wonderful things done? Not enough, in my view, but a really, really good start. It's because we had a majority in the Senate. So I think one person is not enough. I'm here to ask for your support and help. I have a website, irenebowling.com. You can find out all the little bio details and all of that. But I think that many of you have heard me speak before when I ran in 2014. The reason I'm running is because I am disgusted and amazed and appalled at the lack of awareness and help for especially working class folks in our state. I am pro-union, pro-labor. I am pro-environmentalist. I want to preserve what we have, especially in the 35th. That's one of the reasons we all live here and want to be here. And we have to bring jobs into our area. We have to watch out on higher land taxes that, of course, are forcing some people out of their homes. I know several of them. So people are concerned about our tax structure in the state, that we're trying to support a lot of important things like education, but maybe we need to adjust how we're doing that, how we're paying for things. So we need to have a hard, cold, and very analytical look at the revenue source in this state. We need to protect our children, and as an educator and as a mother of 3 college-age students, I think we should have free community college education in this state. The other big issue is affordable health care. I don't think there should be anything undermining that, and I think it's a terrible thing. I was at the WEA meeting earlier today, and they said, what is a living wage, or what does it mean? I said it means that you don't have to worry about having your home and everything that you own taken away from you because you get sick or your kid gets sick. There are a lot of people in that boat here. So I think we have to really, really think hard and severely. I'm tired of playing softball with Republicans. I think let's tell them what we need and what we want, and we're going to do it.
Hello. My name's Jed, also known as Jed Haney, and I'm running for Thurston County Commissioner District 3. A little bit about me is I'm a 4th-generation Washingtonian. My family comes mostly from eastern Washington through the Colville area. Grandparents had a farm out in Sela, Raspberry Farm. I was born in Centralia, however, born back in '82, and grew up in Washington most of my life. One of the nice things about having a split home is sometimes your other parent moves to a nice place. So my mom moved us to Santa Cruz, so I had to split home between Santa Cruz and Lewis County. Growing up for the rest of that time period and then moving back here around 17. I've grown up in Thurston County up until about 26 from that period, and then moving abroad. That time abroad, in about 2004, I started growing medical marijuana for a group of patients. And that does seem kind of cliche, especially back in '04. But these days, it's a little easier to talk about. That experience opened my eyes to a wild array of things. Not just the medical efficiency of botanical plants, their application, but also the hypocrisy of a lot of government institutionalized ideas and ideology that's put into our society at large. Generally haven't been involved in politics up until about 2016. In fact, the thing that got me really involved in politics was actually in 2012 when the initiative was coming through for recreational cannabis. So the thing that really sparked my ignition was recreational cannabis and the implementation of those policies across this state. I was in Yakima at the time, and I was developing an aquaponics business, which was my way of legitimizing my experience in medical marijuana. See, I was trying to take my 5+ years of hydroponic engineering and take it forward. So safe food, access to safe food, the nutritional benefits and the societal benefits of that safe food are also the roots of my activism. So going forward, I spent the last 4 years traveling the state, seeing all forms of local municipal governments. There are a lot of opinions out there how we should run our government on a local level. So I experienced that, and then I went into doing some citizen lobbying work in 2015 and a few years afterwards on the special interest issue. You see, I'm a business owner. I'm a small business owner. I'm an entrepreneur, which means I'm kind of a problem solver. And I like to take inventive and dynamic approaches to common issues. I actually make my money doing this, and I'd like to take these ideas to the county commission candidacy, talk about it in dialogue, and also implement it. So my platform issues are progressive public safety. There's a lot of ways we can implement that. I really appreciate some of Victor's ideas, but ultimately the county budget is predominantly in criminal justice. So we need some reform. I also have environmental management on my platform. Having the roots in my father being an environmental scientist, I'm very sensitive to the issue. Organic farming, sustainable farming, access for land for those farmers is a big issue. And ultimately, economic sustainability and stewardship is my last platform issue. And there's some really big things that overlap here. One of the things that I'd like to bring to the campaign and as commissioner, I'd like to implement is public ownership of medical cannabis and recreational retailers. There's a model in North Bonneville that I'd like to replicate. Thank you for your time, and I can appreciate for your endorsement. Thank you very much.
Question from the Our Revolution team. We're going to give you each 2 minutes to answer this question, and I'll start with Jed. All right, the question is, what do you believe are the 3 most important issues facing your jurisdiction, and how will you address them?
Well, number one, I think environmental management is on my platform for a distinct reason. District 3 is a primary rural district, and we deal with a lot of the pocket gopher implications. Now, I'm not anti-pocket gopher. In fact, I'm willing to take this conversation up on the campaign trail. I've worked with a lot of agencies over the years, and I get it. I get the frustration of regulations, and I definitely get the frustration of landowners or small business owners making an investment into something and expecting something, and then that not coming to fruition because of a certain issue. So I want to look to build bridges between these communities, to find ways where we can use county resources to facilitate the process. In fact, maybe even look at the process again, revamp it if need be. So I'm willing to take that up. Thank you. Another part that I really think that we need to do with environmental management is secure, affordable farmland. Farmland is super important. The next wars we're going to be battling are food and water. This is reality. We are really one scientific advancement away from our dependency on carbon fuel. In fact, hemp has a great lignin mass. I'd love to talk about that at some point. But the reality is those are the wars that we're going to be looking at in the next 30 plus years. Those are the issues that I'm concerned about growing up in Thurston County and placing my investment in my future here. So I'm willing to talk about that as well. And ultimately, we need to talk about reducing our spending, but also bringing spending to the platform, or not spending, bringing revenue to the platform. And with opiate crisis the way it is and now being established as an emergency, as it rightfully should be, anywhere there's medical access implemented, we have 25% reduction in opiate-related overdoses. And that's been proven since 2015. So I plan on expanding access to medical cannabis in Thurston County, period.
The 35th LD is a complicated LD because we have the military complex, industrial complex in the north part. That's the part that I live in. In the middle part, we have Mason County. All of Mason County is in the 35th LD. We have terrible jobless problems since the timber industry has collapsed. And then we have Thurston area, and the part of Thurston does have some rural areas and farming districts, but it also has, of course, state and federal employees. So it's complicated. To try to sum this up in 2 minutes is virtually impossible, but I will say the things that I'm most concerned about and that I think I can help the most in. One is education. That is a universal thing between all 3 of these districts, and it's not fair for children in Issaquah to have incredible palatial schools, and yet the students in Shelton don't even have textbooks. It's not right, and even with this new budget that was come in, is, how are we going to, even though we've got $2 billion practically they're going to teacher salaries, are the schools going to be taking some of that money just to put new roofs on their buildings? I'm very concerned about that, and I know that the teachers are too. We can't retain and keep really top instructors unless we're paying them a decent salary and unless they can afford living in a home that lives, in the area that their students live in. Second thing, as I mentioned earlier, is health care. Predictions are that it's going to go up to 20% more even within this next year. I am a small business owner. I pay for the health care in my family. We pay about $1,500 a month. That's with a $6,000 deductible. I had a kidney stone about 3 months ago. They charged me $14,000 at Harrison for emergency. I was in Estonia visiting my son, and I had pneumonia, and I got billed 115 euros for staying 2 days in the hospital. What's wrong with this picture? Why can't we do better with health care in this country? All right? And then the third thing is jobs. Without a job, you can't get very far. You can't pay for education or for health care. So I have many ideas that I'd like to present at some point. Not necessarily tonight.
So I mentioned a little bit earlier that my 3 platforms are preservation of the safety net, fair taxes, and jobs. So I'll go into a little more detail on the safety net. We have a large percentage of retired folks living in the 35th. And if they're going to be faced with losing their health care, there's going to be some major issues to face there as well. I myself am on Obamacare. I just read where there's a new attack to repeal Obamacare. What are people going to do for health care? This is just the first attack of many on our social safety net. Also read where 10% of our kids in Shelton are homeless. And what are we going to do about that? We can't just shove our kids out with poor education and no roof over their head, or it's just going to result in spiraling down into the depths of poverty. Fair taxes. The Democrats had a plan earlier this year that would have fully funded education and resulted in a property tax cut for 75% of us. It would have been through the implementation of a capital gains tax, which really just affects the wealthy. 70% of the income that the feds get from capital gains is attributed to the 1%. There was also a carbon tax that was proposed, and unless we have a price on carbon pollution, there's going to be no motivation for business and industry to make reductions in it. And so I think that would have made for a fairer tax as well. And then the last was also jobs. I mentioned a little bit about some of the work that I'd done in the past with Boeing. There's also some other wonderful things that we can do, I think we can do with downtown Shelton to turn it around. If you've ever driven on First Street, you just see the deterioration that is occurring. We need to turn that around. Thank you.
First of all, forgive my rudeness, but I want to thank Our Revolution Thurston and Our Revolution National for endorsing me in this race for Thurston County Prosecutor. It is greatly appreciated and quite an honor. Thank you, Our Revolution. I've already mentioned over-incarceration and the amount of money we spend unnecessarily on jailing people before trial. I want to mention a couple of other things. I think one of the biggest things affecting our society, which touches on many of the things that I've heard the other candidates say tonight, is a lack of respect for other people's rights and needs. People don't respect their government. They don't think it's going to do the right thing by them, and we see that on the national level every day and have for a while. It's not that much different on the local level, and I want to change that. We had a shooting in 2015, and the investigation and aftermath of that shooting was disgraceful. There was no objectivity. There was no independent oversight. There was no civilian input. There was no review of standards of policing and any way we could change to make sure things like that don't happen again. I want to start a conviction integrity unit in the prosecutor's office and review things for past injustices, for errors, for changes in science, and just plain human mistakes that have caused people to go to prison unnecessarily or to be sentenced for inordinate amounts of time. By doing that, we'll figure out where we went wrong and make changes to make sure that happens very rarely, if ever. The last thing I'd like to do regarding that is to make sure that we have policies that actually govern the exercise of prosecutorial discretion. We don't have that in Thurston County, and the incumbent is proud of that. He's proud of the discretion that he gives prosecutors, and that one could sentence the same person to probation, the other prosecutor could give someone years in jail, years in prison, and there's nothing to say that that's wrong here in Thurston County. So I want to change all of that, and reform is necessary. Thank you for your endorsement.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, our next question before we go to some audience questions is, and we'll go ahead and start on this side here with Victor. 2 minutes again on this question. What specific plans do you propose to address the issues of income inequity and social inequality in our society?
The prosecutor's office doesn't have any direct influence over some of those, but I believe it can set examples through changing the presumption on releasing people from jail. Bail doesn't work. There's no guarantee that if you're able to afford bail that you're more likely to come back and appear. That is an antiquated idea from the beginning of the country and before that has been proven to have no relationship to actual reality. Just because you're wealthy enough to afford bail does not mean that you're going to come back. That's why we have bail jumpers and bail bondsmen to go catch people who've jumped bail. That's one way, because whether or not you're poor or have money in the bank shouldn't affect whether or not you can get out and work for a living and support your family and love them. People make mistakes, and we have to deal with those mistakes, and I will deal with those mistakes. I was a prosecutor for 15 years in Los Angeles in a special unit. I've tried murders, robberies, home invasions. I know how to deal with serious crime, and I'll admit there are people in prison right now who I put there as we sit here and speak. But there's a big difference between serious crime and a lot of this low-level crime we have here in Thurston County, these misdemeanors and low-level felonies that should be dealt with appropriately and with humanity and justice. Thank you.
When we look statistically at the poorest of our citizens, we're talking about women, we're talking about children, and we're talking about the elderly. In all the doorbelling that I've done, I've gone through so many different houses in the last campaign that I was in, and I was amazed at how many elderly people had tarps over their roofs, just could barely stay in their homes. So I think we have to focus on those groups primarily, at least in the 35th LD, which I've seen so much of. I think retraining, putting money into retraining. A lot of the people that are out of work in Shelton, they haven't been able to find other work, and they need retraining. Many different facilities that the unions have produced. I'm very impressed. I've done a lot of touring around the state. I think they have a lot of great ideas about how people can be trained in different fields, different occupations. Again, I'll reiterate that I think community colleges should be free. We should at least very much reduce tuition so that many people can use the community colleges to retrain for another career. I think our education system should be much more affordable, even in the four-year colleges. I think there is exorbitant price. I think the 1%, 2% should pay more. I don't understand why our tax structure in this country is favoring that. It's gotten way out of hand. It didn't used to be that way, and we should change that. I also think that the tax exemptions that we've been giving to big corporations, for instance, Boeing, where they took the jobs out of the state. In other words, if we're going to give them any favors, then they need to make sure they're keeping their jobs here in our districts and in our state. I think elder care is a big issue. More and more people are reaching elderly care. I take care of my mother, who's 92. I took care of my father, who died last year. He was 97. I know how expensive that is. We couldn't afford to pay anyone to do it. So taking care of someone who's laying in a hospital bed for over a year is not easy work. The people that do that work also need to be supported. We need to expand elderly assistance. Thank you very much.
So a couple of things. So the Board of Health convened, the Thurston County Board of Health convened just the other week, and there was a discussion primarily on homelessness and on opiate overdose rates. And so now we have 2 states of emergency crises in our county. Now this is just an acknowledgement of something that's been going on for a long time. As a small business owner, I have a young business. My business is it's got a few clients. It's on that development curve. It's new in my reality to find this path of success, and I would like to see this path of success for others. But realistically, I'm very connected to that part of the community that understands that homelessness is realistically one disaster or one accident away. And really that is a wide span. That hits a lot of demographics. And so what we need to do right now is really focus on affordable housing to prepare for the 100,000 plus citizens that are coming into this county. 16,000 plus of those citizens are going to be in our rural districts. That's an important issue that I think we all should be looking at. Right now, the county staff is working on expanding 80 attached dwelling units, ADUs, and I think that ultimately the county should be looking at proposals to put aside affordable land housing. There's a lot of models we can look at, and one primarily that I've scoped out in Boulder, Colorado, where it is a transdisciplinary approach to development and affordable housing, where you have developers come in and build a tier of actual commerce that then you have a staged out where you have density for housing, transitional housing, and ultimately land ownership. And this is what we need to do. And when you look at county commissioners, that's their job, is not only to respond to immediate concerns, but to project long-term strategies. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. So we'll move on now to audience questions. And the first question is, and we'll give you 2 minutes for this, and let's start with Jed this time. What business opportunities do you plan to promote, enable, or encourage that meets the needs of the community?
Well, I brought up medical cannabis, but my implementation strategy is not to go to the free market with that. In fact, that is to use public development authority. So I really plan on actually engaging the public in this process. This is not an unheard of thought. Pike Place Market is a public development authority, right? So this small town of 1,000 people took it upon themselves to be that public service for their community. And now it makes that town of 1,000 people $120,000 plus a year. That's really important. Not only are they serving the community, but they're making revenue for the community. So that's primary, right? Secondarily, I come from that industry, and I'm sensitive to some of the regulations that are being applied to it currently. But it's not my only platform, though. As I said, I have organic farming in my roots. And ultimately, our farmers need to be supported in this county. There is a wealth of in our land management. There's a wealth of resources in our land management. And ultimately, what we need to do is incentivize sustainability. We need to incentivize organic growing, natural growing practices. I do some education as well, and I'm working with some folks to bring in Korean natural farming into the Cascadia region. I'm actually working with the University of Tacoma right now. We're doing an education course on that. And it's really important to look to these things in the future. Get off of our dependencies on chemicals and pesticides and organophosphates. Those are the things that are damaging our water table and damaging our environment. And the systemic issues that come from these are not worth the short-term gains. And I just watched in that same meeting that just happened last week when they approved pesticide use. There are so many other options these days. And why the county is spending money on pesticides is beyond me.
One department that I think needs to be reinstituted and used very wisely is the Department of Tourism. I think especially in the 35th LD, we could advance a lot of small businesses immediately. When we're looking for jobs right now that doesn't take a lot of training, we could start working on tourism right now. We could start next month. Think of all the things that could grow off of that. And we have one of the most beautiful districts in the whole state. And yet we are not utilizing what we have just naturally right in front of our noses. We need some state support for developing a Department of Tourism. And I will if we can do that, grab that money into our district. I also think that we need better roads. You can't develop manufacturing or jobs unless you have good transportation. We do not have that, especially in Mason County. We have windy, dangerous roads, especially in the winter, that are unlit. So we can't attract any manufacturing in. It takes the roads between Shelton and Belfair into Bremerton to the shipyard are absolutely unbelievably packed up. It takes an hour and a half to get from one place to the next. So that road through Highway 3 and that whole SKIA development for manufacturing by the airport could be developed. Also, that needs to be hooked up with the Belfair sewer. That's desperately in need of money and customers. And also that would take care of a lot of the environmental issues. So we have some open sludge ponds for sewage in that area that need to be cleaned up. So that area could be developed in manufacturing. We need better roads so that people can get to and from work, and we can get goods to market. We should develop rail going from the shipyard, the Navy, all the way over to Grays Harbor, and tourism.
So I agree, tourism and roads is a big issue that we need to improve. Another thing I've heard people talk about is the building permit process in the 35th. It's very arcane, very difficult to build anything quickly. And so I think we could work on that to make it easier and a little more business friendly. There's also another initiative in place to provide sales tax breaks to companies that move into economically depressed areas in the 35th district. So I think that's a good first step. What else could we do? I think we could probably work with the business community and get some of their ideas as to what are the roadblocks that are in place right now. And so if we can clear out some of those and make it easier, we can get some business in there. You know, I talk about Shelton a lot, so I'm going to continue talking about it. When you go to Paulsbo or Port Townsend, it's a town of about the same size. They're cute little towns that have a lot of tourism. A lot of people come there. And what is it that distinguishes those towns from Shelton? Some of it, I think, might be the marina. Both of those towns have great little marinas, and they have RV parks, and so it attracts a lot of tourists there. The marina that's in Shelton is in bad shape. We don't have any RV areas for tourists to come in, and so that might be another first step. Clean up Front Street, First Street, get a good marina in there, and I think it would start attracting some tourists. Thank you.
Physical infrastructure is important. However, there is a social and political infrastructure that needs to underlie that, or building the physical infrastructure will still not bring growth and business opportunities to the area. Our court system is a mess. The number of continuances keep cases from getting tried. The civil cases can't be resolved. People are avoiding the courts. There was a report by the National Council on Superior Courts last year that was issued on June 1st of 2017 that lays out the tremendous problems in our court system here. And most of that can be laid at the feet of the prosecutor. It excoriates the lack of controls over the staff, over policies, over many things that are going on or not going on, not being done here, that are a matter of course in other jurisdictions. Businesses won't want to come to an area where you can't get a business dispute resolved in court because it's too overcrowded to get your case heard within 3 or 4 years. That's just the reality. The other thing is the expansion of the amount of people we have in custody is a problem too. I heard a couple people, candidates here mention infrastructure for roads, for housing, low-income housing, and for parks and such. There is a fund that we get a couple of million, 2-3 million every year from. It's called the Real Estate Excise Tax. But do you know what our county commissioners did with the real estate excise tax for the next few years? It's budgeted for the jail expansion. $11 million going to the jail expansion. I haven't read a lot about that in the paper. I saw one article last fall. Where's the news on that? Who is building that? Are we going to have another $24 million jail turned into a $48 million jail? This time using our money for low-income housing and roads? We've got to stop that. Thank you.
Okay, for our next audience question, this is just going to be for Irene and David, and then I have a couple other questions for the other candidates. So this one for Irene and David, 2 minutes each. What can we do to support a carbon tax that the governor has suggested?
That's a difficult one because there was quite a bit of controversy over the two different approaches to carbon. I, as a legislator, will definitely support any caps that we can put on carbon emissions, and I do agree with Dave on this that if we could hold the feet to the fire, if that's the correct saying, of our corporations that are producing this pollution, they need to pay for it. This is the whole philosophy, though, that the Republicans do not want to do. In other words, if a corporation creates people having to leave their area, like in downtown Seattle, Amazon, are we responsible for that? Or if a corporation puts pollution up in the air or in the water, are they responsible for that? Are they supposed to pay for that? Or if a corporation like Boeing makes planes and we give them some kickbacks, and yet they take their jobs, thousands of jobs out of the state. Who is responsible for that? If we don't have legislators that are defending everybody else but the corporations and the top 1% in this state, what are we even talking about here? That is the root of the problem. There is a substantial difference between Republicans and Democrats and what they believe in and who they defend. And all of you, I know I'm preaching to the choir, otherwise you all wouldn't be here. You're all Democrats, progressive Democrats, I assume. Maybe a little bit. Okay, sorry to lump you all in the same thing. But all I'm saying here is that this is really the issue. This is why I'm running. This is why I'm a Democrat. And I am not supporting anything, I don't care what, if it's a card, Governor Inslee's or somebody else even has a better idea. But the fact of the matter is, we have to put the big corporations and the people that are running this world, that 1%, we have to put their feet to the fire, and we have to stand up for our rights.
So what can you do? You can vote for us. I was talking with a fella the other day, and he says, you need to think about WIFM. What's in it for me? That's what your constituents are going to say. What are you going to do for me? So if we just say we're going to put a carbon tax on, that's going to float like a lead brick. And so we need to come up with some solutions that will implement a carbon tax, but also benefit some of those folks. So For instance, there's a low-income person that lives across the road from us, just barely making it, and she has just enough dollars at the end of the month to fill her tank up. And so I just could not talk with her in good conscience and say, I want to put a carbon tax on, which is going to raise your fuel prices 3 to 5 cents a gallon. We need to find some other way that she's going to be benefited by that. And not only her, but some of the middle income people as well. And so we need to put our heads together and think about ways that it's going to be attractive, and not just say, we're going to put a carbon tax on because it's good for our children. It is good for our children, but we need to be realistic too and address the people that are going to say, what's in it for me? Because they're a good part of the majority of people that will be voting for us. So, thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much for your excellent answers. This question is going to be for Jed, and then I'm going to have a different question for you, Victor. Okay, so Jed, do you support the Thurston Conservation District, and why or why not?
Well, yes, of course. What an interesting thing to have happen in Thurston County. So Paul Pickett's campaign actually drew a ton of people to the ballot, and in a time when we had a huge depression of voter apathy. So that's really, like, from a political science, and I'm not a political scientist, but from a political science perspective, that's really interesting. So from our camp, we're taking a look at that, and we're saying, okay, who voted for Paul and why, right? And of course, I could throw my own filter on that, but when you're really talking about representing folks, you're talking about representing everyone, right? And so you have to get what is compelling folks to vote. I would go ahead and just break that ice and just let you guys know I'm an independent. I'm a progressive independent, but I'm an independent. And I went ahead and went into this campaign as an independent. So I want to say that because it's really important to talk about what it means to be an independent and what it means to take those values into things like the Thurston Conservation District. And I think for me, it's not finding that compromise and that centrist, but it's defending those values that I was installed with, which makes me, again, as a fourth-generation Washingtonian, an independent. And if you look at voter data in Washington, that's where it's trending. And so we're blessed to have this opportunity to go ahead and really galvanize this moment in a midterm and say, what does it mean to be an independent, and what are the things like the Conservation District do we want to vehemently defend?
Okay, now this one is for Victor. 2 minutes. Does the current prosecutor, as far as you're aware, waste resources by prosecuting frivolous cases?
I'm not going to attack the incumbent directly by saying he does that. He is the head of an office of 32 prosecutors, and it is his duty to supervise and provide guidance to those prosecutors. I will mention a couple of cases that I've heard about through defense counsel and read about in the paper that seemed something that I would not allow if I were a prosecutor of an agency that was in charge of exercising its discretion in a just manner that took into account the resources of my community. There was a man who was detained for blocking the sidewalk in downtown Olympia. He was a tall guy, well over 6 feet tall, and his legs were poking out in the sidewalk, and he was asking people for money. After he was arrested, they took a look at his priors. They found something on him and claimed it was a rock of cocaine. I think there were 2 rocks, and one was drugs and the other was not drugs. And they charged him with a crime. And they sent him to prison for 27 months, essentially for blocking the sidewalk. That cost somewhere in the neighborhood of $140,000. I don't remember the exact figures. What is the benefit to society and to the taxpayer in taking some guy, whatever his priors are, and putting him in prison for a period of time at that kind of cost? That doesn't make any sense to me. A case is a case and a crime is a crime. It should be dealt with appropriately, but excessive punishment, we can't afford it. If people don't want an income tax, then let's be reasonable about what our resources really are and use them accordingly and treat crimes at the level that they occur. Okay. I guess I'm running out of time. I can't go into the other stories, but I do think that resources are wasted at a tremendous rate in this county. Thank you.
Okay, so here's our next audience question, 2 minutes each. We'll go ahead and start with Jed. And I'm not sure if this one exactly applies to you, Victor, but I'll tell you what, you can kind of take it and do whatever you want with it. How about that? Okay, do you have a plan to start or at least help support small businesses in order to create jobs?
Yes. Again, what does it mean to be a progressive independent? What does it mean to be a small business owner, especially at this time of this obvious roller coaster ride of capitalism? Obvious, right? Are we really going to take the efforts of the next 30, 40, 50 years of someone's career and install it in ways of the past that do not make sense? Sure, we've accumulated a bunch of resources and wealth, but that's it. We've accumulated it. We've actually acquired it through acquisition, majorly. So I would like to submit that we need to look at small business opportunity in the future, in cooperativism. I brought up public involvement. I also believe in cooperativism. I believe that it's not socialism, but it's a form of capitalism that can work, and there's models that have sustained years, such as the Mondragon Corporation in Spain, that they install their own education systems, their own health care. They install their own housing. This is how you invest in your community. You don't incentivize corporations to come in and squander your resources. You incentivize your community to learn how to take on their own passions and their own courses and empower them in that. Right down the road is the Northwest Cooperative Development Center, and I currently have a business plan in there, my aquaponics business plan, which was a franchise-based business plan, and I've decided to turn it into a workers' cooperative. Actually, a multi-stakeholder cooperative, which the legislature chewed up a bill this last year, didn't do much with, but they chewed up a bill which would allow an investor class. So Washington State has these great things, social purpose corporations, and now multi-stakeholder cooperatives, and we should run at these. Thank you.
Speaking as a small business person for 38 years in Kitsap County, we came to Kitsap County after going to school, my husband and I, with $2 in penny rolls in a Jar-Tran truck, and we've built a very good business. I understand how difficult it is to survive as a small business person, and the main problem is all of the expenses that raising a family, paying for health care, paying for your taxes on your property, paying employees, B&O. It's not really user-friendly. It's very difficult. You have to make a pretty good amount of money and have a lot of customers, and you have to have a good, strong economy also in order to have those customers to pay for your services or your products. So it's a network of need and usefulness that a small business person has to survive, that we cannot exist alone as small person. And it's also symptomatic. If a small business doesn't go well, I kind of think of it like the frogs in the swamps. They're the first thing that go. They're the first thing that die. Small business people really indicate the health of a country and the health of a society. So again, I don't have anything against working for Boeing or working for Amazon. That's all fine and dandy. But the bread and butter of this country, and also of independent thought and entrepreneur, never could say that word, but being a business person is really small business. And I support that 100%. And I, as a future legislator, I will do everything I can to support small business. I also think that having net neutrality, keeping the internet free, and using technology to the max. I have students in Japan. I have students in Mexico, people that live in very rural areas. I teach people all over the country, and also a lot of my former Navy people that have moved to other places all over the world. I can still teach those students over the internet. I think keeping the internet free is absolutely crucial for the development, and also for rural areas like the 35th, making sure that we have high-speed internet is extremely important for small business. Thank you.
Some of these questions are sounding very Republican. So I'll give you a Republican answer. It's not the job of the United States to make jobs, but it is the job to make a business-friendly environment. And I was thinking about a story that a fella told me the other day. He said, all the taxpayers are complaining about the Port of Bremerton. It costs so much money. We just finally paid it off, and they're not making enough money. But I was working on a Doctor of Business Administration at University of Washington, and my thesis was trying to figure out the economic benefit of a community-type facility. Like, for instance, I picked King County Airport, and you do an analysis of that. You say, well, yeah, that doesn't really bring in a whole lot of money. But the important thing is the ripple effect that it has throughout the economy. And so I found King County Airport, for every $1 of their budget that they spend, it results in $3 to $4 of additional benefit to the community. So they may hire a person to work on the runway, and that person needs to buy a truck and buy groceries and so forth. And they might create another business that needs to service that business. And so there's this ripple effect. And so I think we can look at some opportunities like that, and maybe it will boost the economic vitality of the area to where you'll be creating a lot of small businesses around something like a new marina or an airport or something of that sort. So, thank you.
This question sounds a little similar to the prior question to me, so I'm just going to expand on my answer earlier about infrastructure. If you have a system that is politically sclerotic and has not had any change, it gets stagnant and inefficient, and that is not attractive to business. You don't want to do business in an area where there hasn't been any change despite huge growth in the county over the last 25, 30 years. In my office in particular, that I'm running for, Thurston County Prosecutor, there has not been a contested election since the last millennia. So I want to get in there and shake things up and just make some simple, basic reforms. For example, we've been talking about the jail a little bit tonight. About 488 beds in the jail, $43,000 a year per person. Well, you know, a lot of jurisdictions, they simply manage the jail at a below 100% rate and say, we're going to consider the jail full at 90%. That way, you can clean and repair different parts of the jail, give people something to do, and you've reduced incarceration by 10%. How much would that save alone? You know, I don't know the exact figure, but a back of the envelope calculation, $43,000 a year times, 48 or 50 people, fewer in the jail, that's about $1.9 million, okay? Instead, we're taking the little over that every year from the real estate excise tax, and we're going to build an expansion to the jail. Now, is that a well-run government? Why hasn't anyone brought up that as a solution? Why do you have to charge every crime and give the maximum sentence on that if it's slowly driving the county towards insolvency? We're actually budgeted right now to use some of our rainy day fund for this year's budget. We're budgeted to spend more than we take in revenue. That's not a good situation. It needs to change for business, for everyone.
Mentioned briefly your debate coming up with John Penheim.
Thank you, yes. On Tuesday evening at the Labor Building, where the Democratic Party meets, there's going to be a debate between the incumbent and I for party members, or I believe interested members of the public, if they can fit in. I would love to see some of you there so that we could have these issues exposed and discussed in detail. In addition, I'm having a meet and greet in Yelm the following evening, the 26th, and I have some flyers on the table, and if you know anybody in Yelm or want to come yourself, I'd love to see you there. It should be an interesting evening. Thank you.
Okay, and then to wrap things up here, we'll just give each of our other candidates here just a brief opportunity to say, you know, what's happening in their campaigns coming up and maybe how people could plug in and help them out. And we'll start with Jed here. You can take a minute or so to do that.
Well, thank you. First off, I'd just like to say thank you to our revolution and to the local community members. And Lacey, good luck with your, sounds like your next round of activism. Sounds like you've been active for a little bit, so it's really awesome. Well, you can catch up to my campaign right now. We have some public events. I think on my calendar, the most recent is going to be the Independence Day Parade in Tumwater. I have some volunteer forms in the back on my clipboard if you feel so compelled to. We're definitely looking for volunteers. Right now we're peeling through data and we're doing our doorbelling plans. So that's some fun stuff, actually. It's good to talk to people. I've grown up talking to a lot of people in different ways. So I grew up as a Jehovah's Witness, actually. So I'm kind of used to doorbelling. So some of the other stuff that you can catch up to me on is, on Facebook, social media, on my website, voteforjed.com, which technically is lost in internet land right now, but it will be found one day. My technical support tells me so. So if you have an issue with that, please don't hesitate to send me another email. This is something I've been dealing with for a week. And I've been told that's what all these campaigns deal with, so I'm just going to take people's faith on it. But otherwise, you can just get a hold of me at voteforjed.com or jed@voteforjed.com. Thank you so much.
It was such a pleasure being here this evening and also meeting the other candidates and getting to know their viewpoints. I learned a lot, and thank you for sharing those with me. My campaign manager, Daniel George, is sitting right here. So if you have any questions, we're looking for volunteers to do doorbelling with us. We will be here Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, doorbelling, and with some, let's see, who's with us on Saturday? Beth Dolio? Yeah, so we've got a lot of things going on down in your neck of the woods, as they say. We also have a kickoff in Shelton. We're going to be doing one in Kitsap. Shelton is this Sunday at 1 o'clock. It's going to be just a hamburger, hot dog thing. And there's also an antique car show going on at the same time. So if you happen to be a car enthusiast, and I can drool over some of those incredible cars, you can kill two birds with one stone. And then we will be setting up, yet to be determined, a kickoff down here in Thurston. Yes, sir. Past Rochester. It is 87 miles from one tip to the next. Goes across the Hood Canal into the Olympic National Forest And I am in the northernmost part. I am a half a mile from the northernmost. So coming down here is quite a trek. In fact, we're going to try to think of maybe camping out on people's living room floors or something while we're down here, so we don't have to keep on driving back and forth and save on some gas. So anyway, if you can help us out in any way, shape, or form, be very, very grateful. And we're really looking forward to turning things around here in the 35th. Thank you very much.
Well, I want to say thank you for being informed voters, spending your night here talking to the candidates and asking questions so that you really can make a wise choice on your vote. Our campaign is just starting up. We're still kind of waiting for some of our, they call them Slim Jims. That's those little things that they stick in your door there when somebody comes to visit. So as soon as we get those, then we're going to start doorbelling. And that's going to be our strategy, is just doing a lot of doorbelling, because the last attempt to put a Democrat into office and to the seat that I'm running for, people said, well, probably wasn't enough doorbelling done, and that's the most effective way that you can win the election. And there's actually more Democrats registered than Republicans in the 35th and Mason County. All we have to do is just to get people out to vote. We have all Republican representatives, but there are more Democrats. So what's wrong with that picture? It's because the Democrats are not getting out to vote. So energize your neighbors and get them out to vote, and we will win this election. So, question?
Who's the incumbent that you're running against?
I'm running against Drew McEwen. Yeah. Thank you.
I need your help. I need every one of you to get the word out about this real state of affairs here in Thurston County and how we can turn it around. Many of you have friends who may not know or care much about the prosecutor's race because some of the issues are difficult to understand and complicated, but it's vital. It has an impact on so many areas of our civic life. It has such an impact on the number of people who need social services and how that ripples through the generations. We need some basic reforms here in the criminal justice system, and I'd be honored to have the vote of each and every one of you. And if any of you want to invite your friends over for me to talk with them, I'd love to do that. Please contact my campaign manager. Please take a flyer. If you can't make it, please hand it to someone else. But we need to get the word out because we're wasting so much money, so many human lives each and every year. And I decided to run because the next time there's a unjustified shooting of some sort on the street, I don't want to say that I didn't do everything I could to try to make sure that things changed here in Thurston County. And I hope all of you think about that as well when you go forward. Thank you so much, Our Revolution Thurston and Our Revolution National, for your endorsement. It's really an honor, and thank you so much for listening to me tonight.
Okay, well, thank you all so much for coming and sharing all that great information and perspective. I know I got a lot out of it. I'm sure all the audience members did too. And I hope that everybody here tonight can find some time in their busy schedule to support these wonderful candidates and dig deep in your wallets. It takes an incredible amount of time and energy and money to run for office, and they need all the support that we can give them, sir. So again, thanks for coming tonight, and have a nice evening.